Hello everyone, welcome to our 100th video special. And this time I got someone very special with us today. And sir, please tell us who you are.
Well, last time I checked, I am Mike Pollock, the voice of Dr. Eggman, among so many other things.
And so today we're actually going to be doing Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. And
Fantastic.
this is also going to be a bit of a Q&A. Something a little
Alright.
different than what I usually do. So guys, sit back, enjoy, and let's get things underway.
Yep. I didn't even think about it, but Dr. Robotnik's Mean Machine rather appropriate.
Yeah,
even
I
though it
actu-
technically is a different character.
Yeah,
Close enough.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, Mike, tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, let's see. I've been doing this voice acting thing more or less full-time since around 2000. Before that, I did some radio stuff. Still dabble in radio and at least radio commercials based on the other voiceover stuff that I do. But I'm a full-service voiceover actor doing commercials and cartoons and video games and boring corporate narrations and occasionally audiobooks and e-learning and anything that can't speak for itself. I can provide a voice to the voiceless.
Man, sounds like you've been up to a lot.
As a freelancer, which I am, I've got to constantly search for work, and if I'm lucky, sometimes I book some of that work.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, what was the first thing you actually ever did?
In terms of what?
In terms of voice acting, what was the first job like you
Just in
ever
general.
got?
If you consider the high school radio thing that I did, I worked at a college radio station that had a high school radio program, and then they asked me to come in and voice little bits for my high school, and then they had a weekly comedy show that needed an extra voice, and I happened to be in the room, and they asked me to record a couple of announcer lines because I was the only one who could say the name of a local town backwards.
Wow.
So there's that.
Yeah, that's actually really surprising. The only one that could say the town's name backwards.
Apparently that skill comes in handy once in 1,000 years.
Charles, we actually talked about this off camera. You got a couple of questions to ask Mike
Yeah,
here.
I came up with a couple. What would you say, in terms of cartoons, video games, stuff like that? What do you think is the oddest or strangest thing you've had to say that you can recall?
That's the kind of thing that is tough to answer because the whole point of one of the many wonderful things about voice acting is you don't have to memorize dialogue. So I pay attention to what I'm saying when I'm there, and then as soon as I've left the room, it suddenly fades from
gone.
memory. But
Yeah.
one bizarre audition that comes to mind was for a horror film. They needed a chicken that was being boiled to death, which I did a brilliant performance, but did not book that job.
Wow.
Wow.
I kind of want to find that movie.
I don't know whatever became of it, if anything.
I actually did not know that. I guess you still do
Oh,
learn new
this
things
is
every
pretty
day.
cool.
I'm chock full of trivia.
Mm.
I'm chock full of trivia too. Most of it's useless.
That's the best kind.
I'm just one of those average idiots you find just standing on a doorstep.
Sounds reasonable.
Uh, and I just mainly just talk out of my ass most of the time.
All right.
Just to make myself sound smart because, hey, half of the time I don't want to make myself sound like an idiot.
Makes sense.
Which is very.
Uh,
Yeah. Actually, before we recorded this, I did a lot more research on you, and I'm like, I never realized how much stuff you have actually done. Like, of course, you're known for Eggman, but
Well,
you've
that's
done a
the-
lot of commercials I've watched as a kid, like all kinds of stuff.
That's the thing. Most people focus on a favorite character and don't think of all the other things voiceover artists have to do or get to do. I am a full-service actor, so if there's a role that I can perform, whether it's a wacky character or just a boring announcer, if someone will hire me, I'll be there.
I wouldn't say you're a boring announcer, though. I actually kind of, going back and watching your own stuff, I actually kind of like your voice. You have a lot of enthusiasm.
Well, part of the reason people hire me for boring narrations is because I can make boring narrations sound interesting. So there's a extremely tedious piece that I did on a series on loan factoring, which even I didn't know what I was talking about most of the time. But it was an e-learning series, and their idea was we want to make sure that the people that have to watch this for their job don't get bored. So they found me, and I can make the boring sound less boring, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh man, I'm having one of those brain fart moments. Oh, not now.
Alright.
I was actually thinking about this because like like I actually kind of have prepared for this, but I was reading stuff on your site, and who was the first voice that you ever actually did for a actual TV series?
My first video presentation was a VHS release at the time. It was just around 2000 of Little Tug's Big Adventure. I performed all of the male voices in it was live action footage of boats in New York Harbor, and they kind of weaved a story around the footage, and I voiced all of the male boats. They wanted me to try the female boats as well, but that performance did not meet their approval.
So that's pretty reasonable.
It was something. It's still available on Amazon because it's so rare, the price is way beyond what it's worth. Don't bother.
At least you're honest about it.
Well, I've got a copy, and even I haven't seen it in years.
So, in your career so far, did you ever think, you get up one morning and you would think that you'd be doing this for a living?
Well, I've always been using my voice for a living, with the exception of the first paid job I ever had of a gate guard at a country club. Every other job has, to some degree, used my voice. When I was in radio, when I was writing for a radio syndication company and voicing occasional comedy bits, I was always using my voice to some degree or another. And when radio had enough of me, I decided let's just focus on the voice acting aspect. And I'm delighted to say that I work fairly frequently. Still a little more free time than I'd like, but that's the nature of the business.
I've always liked radio myself.
Because everyone likes a little bit of free time.
Sure, but the thing about being a freelancer is if you're not working, you're not earning. So for me, free time's not
finding stuff.
Yeah, you need to find the perfect balance between free time and working.
Exactly.
That's why I picked up YouTube as a business. Because it gives me a chance to do what I like to do and something just to pass the time away.
Perfect.
And it gives me a chance to just blab endlessly at people that even wants to stay around just to listen to me talk.
Excellent.
Yeah, I haven't really figured out what I'm doing yet, but this is my friend, so I'm helping him out. I have a lot of really weird and pointless things to say, so.
All right.
So, when Sega hired you to be the voice of Dr. Eggman, and did you ever think that you actually be doing the voice this long, especially after, once they dropped all the rest of the 4Kids actors?
No, it's always hard to predict the future. When I booked this gig, I was, among other things, part of the 4Kids Productions talent pool. So they had me doing a whole bunch of shows: Kirby Right Back at Ya, Ultimate Muscle, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles occasionally, Viva Pinata, Go Go Riki. And one of the things they had me audition for was Dr. Eggman in Sonic X, which I love every booking I get. So getting a new gig is always a great thing. And it just so happens that this transition from being the dub of Sonic X to the video games that were released shortly thereafter. And then when the giant recasting came, they asked me to re-audition and were kind enough to rebook me after I re-auditioned doing the same thing that I'd been doing for the last few years. And with knock on whatever wooden substance I might have handy, but that's continuing to this day, and that's spectacular. 12 years in one role, which is not any particular record in acting as a whole, but it happens to be a record for the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise, at least in English, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's one heck of an accomplishment. Man.
I guess.
Because, I mean, when I hear of, like, the voice acting business, like, people be doing a voice for so long and then they come and, like, get replaced by somebody else. But it's, from what I know, and I'm, like, kind of, like, I might be talking my ass here, I don't know. But from what I know is that not very many people actually do get a chance to go for a role and actually stick with it for as long as that they would want.
Well, just like any job, I'm at the mercy of the employer. So in this case, it's up to them how long they want to keep me, and they've, I guess, appreciated what I've done well enough to keep me along for a while.
And I will say myself, I'm really glad that he did.
So am I.
Because, like, I mean, I heard many different voice renditions of Dr. Robotnik, Dr. Eggman in the past. From the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog to Set Am, and I'm still unsure what abbreviation
it just
that
means
is.
Saturday morning. Told you that, man.
Oh god. And from like all what I heard, I think there's a few. I think was it Dean Bristow? His voice stands.
He came before.
Yeah, his voice stands out because he got this deep kind of. Very recognizable voice, like something
sinister Robotnik. I know which one.
Yeah, and when I first heard your voice in Sonic X, I was like, like I immediately could tell that this was a completely different voice. And the more and more I heard, the more and more I began to enjoy it. So, in my personal opinion, that the most longest running Eggman voice I heard, yours is the best one.
Well, thank you.
Definitely the most recognizable.
Thank you.
I'm not as big of a Sonic fan as him, but I do like the series. But like the first time I ever heard Eggman's voice was probably from Sonic X, or that or Sonic Heroes. But yeah, it was the only time. Like it was the first time, and like that's kind of the only voice yours is the only kind of voice I can put to it.
Thank you. Well, I would add a footnote to that in that for the audition process originally, they gave me clips of Dean Bristow to match, and so I went into the audition doing my best Dean Bristow. I'm Dean Bristow. And I did a couple of callbacks of that, doing basically the same thing. And finally, the folks at Sega were convinced that I was the guy to be hired, which is excellent. And after the first few episodes of Sonic X, the director and producer and I realized that the role has a little more comedy than we had figured, so let's add some peaks and valleys of pitch to the voice. So they gave me the template of Martin Short's Jiminy Glick character, who starts up way up high and then goes way down low. So they said, do some of that. So I ended up doing some of that just to allow room for the comedy. But then I'll also point out for the more dark and serious games, such as the dreaded Sonic 06, I gave a much darker performance because that's what the script required. If I was doing Sonic 06, threatening death to people in a comedy way, that would have looked and sounded a little silly. So, as a full-service actor, I look at the script and determine what the tone of the script is, and that's the delivery that I give it.
I'm glad you brought up Sonic 06 because I was scared too.
But all right,
that game in particular has kind of a reputation.
I am proud of all the work I do, even the stuff that other people think I should regret. The fact that somebody was willing to hire me and give me money for it, that's compliment enough for me. So, sorry.
Yeah, because like as everyone knows, like not very many good things is heard about Sonic 06. I mean, being that it's rushed, I think that's what mainly brought it down.
Yeah, I liked recording it. That was fun. But then again, I love working.
And that also brings up another fact, like the way that you do Eggman's voice, like it's a mixture. Depending on how you do the voice, like you get a seriousness, and you also get a bit of like a bit of comedy as well. Like I'll even mention Sonic Colors, and and a few of the scenes into it. I mean, I couldn't help but just laugh because it's funny, just how the lines were done.
Well, that's the whole point about being an actor. My job is to interpret the script and figure out how to make it entertaining, or figure out what the writer meant it to sound like, and then I will perform it accordingly to the best of my ability.
Because I mean, like what Charles was going about earlier, like about Sonic fans. I mean, I've been a part of this series now for 16 years.
Excellent.
And I'm 22 right now, so I mean that's a little over 3/4 of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to what I mentioned before, like I mean I seen a lot of things, I heard a lot of things, and there's one thing that comes to mind. It's actually something fairly recent. Is Sonic Boom.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I would say, like much like what I said before, I like where the show is going, and I like what people are doing with it.
That's nice.
Because I actually seen episode 40, and I seen a side of Eggman that I don't normally see. And that is, instead of just like him standing there, pick up his package to minding his own business, he actually helped out one of his arch nemesis. And I mean, that's not something that you see too often. Which this actually brings up this question. How many times, if you can remember, that you actually had to help out, say, one of your enemies, like so-called enemies?
I don't recall, and that's pretty much for the same reason as I mentioned earlier. There's no point in me remembering lines or scenes or anything, because once I've recorded what I have to record and the producer and director are happy and I've left the booth, I'm on to worrying about the next thing. So specific details, until I see something on TV or on video, most of the details have already left my head.
Yeah, and it's maybe seem like a bit of an obscure question, but do you sometimes find yourself off camera, sometimes stepping into the voice of Eggman, even sometimes when you don't mean to? We've been doing it for so long.
It's probably more coincidence than anything, but the sound of me yelling at my children probably sounds a little too much like Eggman than it should, but that's pretty much, it's just the sound of me yelling, so you can only yell in so many different ways.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and I actually read this on your website. Oh yeah, and if anyone wants to know any information on this guy, the link to his website will be in the description, so you guys can go and check it out and have as much information as what you want. The amusement park incident, what happened with that?
Well, that was just a little bit of fun. We were, the family and I were out for an evening at a fun fair, and one of the big prizes that they were giving away in the Midway that year were essentially life-sized Sonics and Knuckles and Shadows. and some kid happened to be walking by while the family and I were enjoying a refreshing beverage, and I noticed he had a life-size Sonic, essentially riding on his shoulders, because there aren't many other ways you can carry a life-size Sonic through a fair. And I looked at the kid and just thought, shall I have a little bit of fun? Yes, I guess I will. And as he got close enough for me to hear, or for him to hear me, I yelled out, "Look, it's Sonic!" And just watched the kid's head whip around, wondering where that sound came from. And I just went right back to drinking my refreshing iced beverage, thinking, don't look at me, I'm just some guy here with my family, enjoying a refreshing beverage.
Man, that must be something interesting though about like being a voice actor and like having your voice completely different than what the character you portray. Is that you could just be walking along in like normal streets and no one would know just who you are unless you did the actual voice.
Happens all the time. I've gone to GameStops with the kids, and the folks working at GameStop or shopping at GameStop have no idea that I'm in a large number of